still get that moment. Sometimes when I'm halfway through a normal day or scrolling through something stupid like memes, and I'll feel it all over again. That pause, that breath I forgot to take when I realized who I was looking at on that screen. It was my brother. Let me back up. This happened about 5 years ago. I was 22, working part-time and drifting a bit. I spent way too much time online, if I'm being honest, especially late at night when the house was dead quiet and I couldn't sleep. There's something weird about that hour between midnight and 4 a.m., where your brain convinces you that clicking on anything is fine, like you're not accountable at that time. That's how I ended up on the dark web. I wasn't into anything sketchy. I wasn't trying to buy anything illegal or hire a hitman or whatever people think happens there. For me, it was just about curiosity, exploration. I liked peeling back layers of the internet, seeing what existed underneath the surface. I followed all the usual safety advice, VPNs, Tails OS, burner laptops. It wasn't about being edgy. I genuinely just liked the sense that I was in a space where the rules didn't fully apply. At first, it was the usual. Forums, strange market pages, broken storefronts that had obviously been dead for years. Occasionally, I'd come across these obscure blogs, like digital journals of people who clearly weren't right. Some of them were rambling messes. Others were scarily lucid. Those were the worst. One night, I found a link in the comments of a dead thread. It was just a string of text, no preview, no context. But the message above it just said, "For those who want to see what they paid for." It led to a blank page with a single embedded player. No chat box, no menu. Just the word "live" in red text above the video window. The loading bar took a while to move, and I remember that because I nearly clicked away out of boredom. But then the stream started. It was dark at first, bad lighting. I could barely make anything out. Just a person, slumped forward, hands bound, shirtless, face obscured by their hair and the grainy quality of the feed. And I remember thinking, this has to be fake. Like, who's going to live stream a crime? That's ridiculous. It has to be performance art or a prank site. I kept looking for the watermark or the subscription prompt. Something to tell me it was just theater. But then he looked up. Just for a second. That's when my stomach dropped. Because even though the quality was awful, I knew that face. It was Jamie, my brother. I hadn't seen him in months. He'd taken a gap year to go traveling after college. Southeast Asia mostly. Last I heard, he was somewhere in Cambodia. He'd post on Instagram now and then, but nothing recent. I didn't think much of it. I figured Wi-Fi was spotty, that he was just being present or whatever. But there he was, on my screen, bruised, silent, and alive. I froze. I didn't know what to do. I just sat there with my hand on the mouse, breathing like I'd just sprinted somewhere. The stream didn't show anything violent, not at first. It was just him, alone in that room. And the longer I watched, the more certain I became that this wasn't staged. The lighting wasn't cinematic. The set wasn't designed. It was just real. I remember I started whispering to myself, like saying things out loud would make it stop. I kept repeating his name under my breath, like he might somehow hear it through the screen. Then a figure entered the frame. No face, just boots and gloves. They walked into shot slowly, and Jamie flinched. He didn't scream or cry. He just recoiled, like someone who'd already been through this more than once. That's when I snapped out of it. I yanked the Ethernet cable, shut the laptop, nearly dropped it. My hands were shaking so bad I almost couldn't unlock my phone. I called my parents first. It was 3 a.m, but they picked up on the first ring. I couldn't explain anything clearly. I think I just kept saying, I saw him, over and over. They contacted the embassy, filed reports, reached out to his travel contacts. Everything went into overdrive. And the weirdest part? They found him. Not the same day, but close. He was discovered in a warehouse near the edge of Phnom Penh, drugged, dehydrated, but alive. He had no idea how long he'd been there. The last thing he remembered was getting into a tuk-tuk after a night out. Everything after that was a blur, just flashes of light, muffled voices, and cold concrete. He didn't know about the stream. He still doesn't, actually. I never told him. I told everyone else I found a tip online that someone had posted about a man matching his description being held in a warehouse. It wasn't even a lie, really. Just not the whole truth. After he came home, things went back to normal, on the surface. He doesn't talk about it, and we all pretend that's fine. But sometimes I catch him staring off when he thinks no one's watching, like he's still there, stuck in that room, waiting for something to happen again. And I get it, because I still see him too. Not the version we have now, but the one on that screen, silent, tied, waiting. That was the last time I ever touched the dark web. I wiped everything, scrubbed the drives, burned the laptop, if you can believe that. Literally threw it in a fire pit. I don't know who ran that site, or how they found him, or how I ended up there at the exact right time. Maybe it wasn't coincidence. Maybe someone wanted me to see it. Either way, I got out. He got out. But I still don't let myself think about how many other people clicked that same link and didn't recognize the face. He didn't say anything. He just tilted his head, really slowly, like he was trying to figure something out about me. Not if he was going to do something, but whether it'd be worth the effort. The link wasn't hidden. I don't know why that's the part that sticks with me, but it does. It wasn't masked behind some shady redirect or buried deep in a thread. It was just there. Centered on the page in plain text. Apply for jobs. High payout. No questions. And I clicked it. No second thought. No suspicion. Just bored curiosity and too much time on my hands. Back then, I was working nights at a loading dock, graveyard shift, Tuesday through Saturday. It wasn't a hard job, but it was long and mindless. Mostly just scanning pallets, logging codes, occasionally clearing stuff out when shipments got backed up. The kind of work where your brain starts to drift a lot, especially after midnight. My breaks were the same every night. 10 minutes in this little plastic booth with flickering overhead lights and a vending machine that only took change. I'd lean back in the chair, crack open a can of Red Bull that tasted like copper, and scroll through my usual trash rabbit holes. Forums, conspiracy boards, that sort of thing. It sounds sketchy, but it's just what helped the time pass. There was one site in particular I kept checking. I won't say the name. Honestly, I think it's gone now anyway. But it was this mix of internet horror stories and supposed sightings of weird things online. Creepy videos, strange live streams, hidden pages on obscure browsers. A lot of it was clearly made up, but every now and then someone would post something that didn't feel like a joke. That's where I saw the link. It was just sitting there in a thread that had nothing to do with jobs or money or anything even remotely related. Someone had replied to an old post with that single sentence, apply for jobs, high payout, no questions, and the link right underneath it. No context, no replies. I don't even remember hesitating. I wish I did. I wish I could say I felt something off, or that I paused. or that I even thought about it at all, but I didn't. I was just curious, bored. So I tapped it. The page that opened was, honestly, underwhelming. No graphics, no design. Just a list of jobs in plain white text against a black background. Stuff like overnight courier needed, or remote surveillance, high risk, 3 nights only. And then a few more, vague ones. One of them said, wet work, international, name already chosen. I didn't know what that meant at first, but I remember staring at it because it was the only one that didn't have a click to apply button. It just sat there, like it had already been filled. The weird thing was, there wasn't much else on the site. No about page, no links to other forums, just a handful of jobs and a single message box at the bottom right corner, like one of those live chat things customer support uses. I don't even know how long I was staring at it when a message popped up. I didn't type anything. I hadn't even touched the keyboard. It just appeared. One sentence. I don't want to say what it said exactly, but it was direct, personal. Like whoever it was thought I was logging in to do something, not just look around. I closed everything immediately, like browser, tabs, apps, all of it. I even shut the whole phone off, which I never do. My hands were a bit shaky. My mouth was dry. I remember feeling suddenly very aware of how quiet it was in that booth, like I'd just been pulled out of something without realizing how deep in I was. The rest of the night passed in a kind of haze. I kept trying to tell myself it was nothing, probably a bot or someone screwing around. But when my shift ended and I walked to my car, I saw something that snapped me out of it fast. There was a napkin tucked under my windshield wiper. Not a receipt or a flyer, just a neatly folded napkin. White, unbranded. Inside, written in what looked like permanent marker, was one word. One word I'm not going to repeat. I just sat there in the driver's seat for a while, engine off, staring at the dash. I kept thinking. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone thought my car was someone else's. But that doesn't even make sense when I say it out loud. It was too specific. I didn't go home right away. I parked behind a pharmacy a few blocks away and just sat there for a while. My phone was still off. I didn't want to turn it back on. I was scared it'd buzz again. For the next couple of days, things were off. It's hard to describe. It's not like someone was obviously following me or anything. It was more like something had shifted. My mailbox kept getting flyers with the wrong name. Junk mail addressed to someone I'd never heard of. Same building, same unit number, just a different name. And I kept seeing this SUV parked across the street when I'd get home. Different times, but always the same vehicle, same shape, same blacked out windows. I told myself I was imagining it until one night I walked past it and noticed the engine was still warm. Then the email started. At first, I thought it was spam, but they weren't spam. They were blank. Just subject lines. They said things like, "You're not moving fast enough," or "He's watching," or "Answer the door." I ignored all of them until the last one. That one said to answer the door. The email hit my inbox around 2:43 a.m. I remember the time because it was the exact moment someone knocked. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe. I just stood in the hallway, staring at the door, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. When I finally looked through the peephole, there was no one there. I thought maybe it was just a prank, but when I checked the footage from the security camera outside my door, there was nothing. Just a black gap in the footage between 2:42 and 2:45. Everything else that day had recorded just fine. That's when I went to the police. And, yeah, what a waste of time. The guy behind the desk looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. When I explained, he asked me if I spend a lot of time on conspiracy sites. He smiled when he said it. That smug little smile people give when they've already decided you're a lunatic. So I left. I went home, deleted everything off my phone, wiped my laptop, changed my passwords. I didn't sleep. I kept the lights off, curtains closed. I sat on the floor in the hallway for hours just listening. Around 3 a.m., I looked out the window. There was a man across the street, just standing there, not moving, not smoking or pacing or looking at his phone, just facing my building. He stood like that for maybe a minute. I blinked, and he was gone. That was it for me. I grabbed a bag, packed what I could, and decided to leave town. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to go. I took the stairs because the elevator was slow and loud and felt like a trap. But when I hit the second floor landing, I stopped. There was someone sitting there, cross-legged, still, facing the wall. At first, I didn't even realize he was a person. He didn't react when I came down the stairs. He didn't move at all. Then slowly, he stood up. He didn't say anything threatening. He didn't have a weapon. He just looked at me, calm and bored, almost, like this whole thing had dragged on too long. And then he said something that made my skin go cold. He thought I was the target, that I was the job. I don't remember how I got outside. I don't remember running. I just remember that sick feeling in my gut, like my stomach was being crushed from the inside. I didn't go back. I didn't even stop to get gas. I drove until my phone died, and I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. Then I crashed at a friend's place 2 towns over. I gave her some half-truth about being stalked. She didn't press me for details. She just gave me a blanket and let me sleep on her couch. The email stopped after that. I stopped seeing the SUV. No more knocks, no more blank messages. But I still think about that man. I think about what he said and how calm he was, how certain. I didn't accept the job, but that didn't matter because someone else did. It's strange how the most life-changing discoveries can come from the most mundane tasks. 5 months ago, while cleaning up my digital clutter, I found something that has completely destroyed my sense of security and trust. I've moved house twice since then, changed my phone number, and still can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I'm writing this down partly as a warning, but mostly because keeping it to myself is driving me insane. I work in IT support for a university in Manchester. Nothing glamorous, just fixing printers, resetting passwords, and explaining to professors why they shouldn't click on suspicious email links. I've always been organized with my physical possessions, but absolutely terrible with digital housekeeping. My desktop was always a mess of random files. My download folder, a digital wasteland of forgotten PDFs and installation packages. My bad habits caught up with me when my laptop started running painfully slow. After putting it off for months, I finally set aside a Sunday afternoon to do a proper digital cleanup. I was living alone in a small flat near the university, having recently broken up with my girlfriend of 3 years. She'd moved to Edinburgh for work, and neither of us wanted the hassle of a long-distance relationship. So there I was, single again, at 32, spending my weekend deleting old files, while rain pelted against my windows. I started with the obvious stuff, emptying the recycle bin, clearing my downloads folder, uninstalling unused programs. Then I moved on to my email accounts, where years of newsletters, promotional offers, and spam had accumulated. I had 3 accounts that needed attention: my work email, my personal Gmail, and an old Hotmail account I'd had since university that I mainly kept for nostalgia and as a backup. The Hotmail account was the worst. Over 15,000 unread messages dating back to 2008. I was about to mass delete everything when I noticed the junk folder had a notification showing 246 items. Curious about what the spam filter had caught, I clicked on it. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect: penis enlargement offers, fake lottery wins, phishing attempts. But as I scrolled down, I noticed something odd. There were several emails from the same address, just a string of numbers and letters at a domain I didn't recognize. Each had an attachment named with a date, going back about 2 years. The most recent one was from just a week earlier. Now, I know better than to open random attachments, especially from my junk folder. That's literally part of what I teach in the basic IT security workshops for new staff. But something about the systematic naming and regular frequency made me pause. These didn't look like typical spam. They looked almost like scheduled reports. Against my better judgment, I opened the most recent email. There was no message, just a text file attachment. I scanned it with my antivirus before opening it, and it came back clean. When I opened the file, I found what appeared to be login credentials and instructions. There was a long string of characters labeled onion URL, followed by a username and password. Below that were brief instructions. Use Tor browser only. Log in within 24 hours of receipt or credentials will reset. Do not share access. Monthly payment confirmed. I recognized the reference to an onion URL and Tor. This was clearly related to the dark web. But why was someone sending these details to my old email address? And what was this about a monthly payment? I checked the other emails and found they all contained similar text files, each with different credentials but the same instructions. The dates corresponded to the first day of each month, like clockwork. My first thought was that these were meant for someone else. Perhaps the previous owner of my email address, though I'd had this account since I was an undergraduate. My second thought was more unsettling. What if someone was using my forgotten email account for something illegal? I should have deleted everything right then, should have changed my password, set up 2-factor authentication, and forgotten all about it. But curiosity is a powerful force, especially when you're bored and alone on a rainy Sunday. I told myself I was just being responsible. If someone was using my email for something illegal, I should know about it, right? So I downloaded the Tor browser, something I'd never used before despite working in IT. I told myself it was just research, that I would take a quick look and then report anything suspicious to the proper authorities. I copied the onion URL from the text file and pasted it into the Tor browser. It directed me to what looked like a login page with a minimalist black background. No site name, no logo, no indication of what this was for. Just username and password fields. Heart racing, I entered the credentials from the text file. The site loaded to what appeared to be a video hosting platform, similar to YouTube but with a much simpler interface. There were about 24 thumbnails organized in a grid, each showing what looked like CCTV footage of different rooms in a house. Some showed living rooms, others bedrooms, kitchens, even bathrooms. Each thumbnail had a date and timestamp from the previous month. I clicked on one that showed a living room. The video played, showing a completely ordinary scene. A woman in her 30s sitting on a sofa watching television while scrolling on her phone. The footage lasted about 5 minutes, during which nothing remarkable happened. She got up at one point to leave the room, came back with a glass of water, and resumed watching TV. I tried another video, this one of a kitchen. A man was cooking dinner while listening to music. Again, completely mundane. I clicked through several more videos, all showing similar everyday moments in people's lives. It was like watching the most boring reality show ever made. Then it hit me. These weren't actors. These weren't people who knew they were being filmed. These were private moments in private homes, recorded without consent. I was looking at footage from hacked security cameras or compromised devices. My stomach churned as the implications sank in. Someone had been using my forgotten email account as a way to distribute access to what amounted to illegal surveillance. And according to the instructions, someone was paying monthly for this access. I immediately closed the browser, feeling sick with guilt and fear. I'd just watched people who had no idea they were being observed. I'd invaded their privacy, even if unintentionally. And now my IP address was connected to this site, even though I'd used Tor. I spent the next hour changing all my passwords, enabling two-factor authentication on every account I had, and scanning my computer for malware. I debated whether to report what I'd found to the police, but hesitated. How would I explain that I'd accessed the site? Would they believe I'd stumbled upon it innocently? Instead, I decided to send an anonymous tip to the cybercrime unit, providing the email address and a general description of what I'd found, but not mentioning my connection to it. I hoped they would investigate and shut down whatever operation this was. For the next week, I jumped at every notification on my phone, half expecting police to show up at my door. Nothing happened. No response to my tip. No suspicious activity on any of my accounts. I started to relax a little, telling myself that I'd done the right thing and could now move on. Then, exactly 1 month after discovering the emails, I received a message on my personal Gmail account, the one I actually used regularly. The subject line was missed payment, and it was from the same string of numbers and letters as the Hotmail emails. The message was brief. Payment interrupted. Service will terminate unless restored within 48 hours. Recent access from unauthorized location has been noted. My blood ran cold. Whoever was behind this knew that someone different had accessed the account. They had connected my old Hotmail to my current Gmail. They knew who I was. That same night, I noticed something strange. While watching Netflix on my laptop, the webcam light briefly flickered on, then off. It could have been a glitch, but combined with the email, it sent me into a panic. I covered the camera with tape, but the damage to my peace of mind was done. Over the next few days, I became increasingly paranoid. I was convinced my devices had been compromised, that someone was watching me through my own technology. I started unplugging my router at night, covering all camera lenses, even disconnecting my smart TV. 2 weeks after the missed payment email, I came home from work to find my flat had been broken into. Nothing valuable was taken. Not my laptop, not my TV, not even the cash I kept in my desk drawer. The only thing disturbed was my bedside table, where my diary had been moved. I reported the break-in to the police, but without anything stolen, they didn't seem particularly concerned. I didn't tell them about the emails or the website. It seemed too disconnected, too paranoid. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the building, every passing car outside sent my heart racing. Around 3 a.m., I got up to make tea and noticed my laptop was open on the kitchen table. Not where I'd left it, and certainly not how I'd left it. On the screen was a text document containing addresses and personal information about the people I'd seen in those videos. Below their information was my own. My full name, address, workplace, parents' address, and the routes I typically took to work. At the bottom was a simple message: witnesses are participants. Participants are responsible. I packed a bag and left that night, staying with a friend while I looked for a new place to live. I told everyone I'd had a plumbing disaster in my flat that made it uninhabitable. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, even considered changing jobs. It's been 5 months since then. I've moved twice, switching cities entirely the second time. I live completely offline now. No social media, no cloud storage, no smart devices. I'm writing this on a new laptop that has never been connected to my name in any way. But sometimes, I still see the webcam light flicker when I'm working late. Sometimes, I receive blank emails from addresses I don't recognize. And last week, I found a note on my car windscreen with just an Onion URL written on it. Different from the original one, but unmistakably similar in format. I don't know who these people are or why they chose my forgotten email account for their operation. I don't know if they're still watching those unsuspecting people or if they're now watching me instead. All I know is that somewhere in the vastness of the dark web, there are people who consider me a loose end that needs tying up. So if you ever find something unexpected while clearing out your digital junk, something that doesn't quite make sense, something that perhaps wasn't meant for you, delete it, close it, forget you ever saw it, because once you've seen something you shouldn't, there's no going back. And in the dark corners of the internet, there are people who will go to extraordinary lengths to protect their secrets. So I've been putting this off for a while now, but I think I need to tell someone what happened last summer. My so-called therapist says I should write it all down, but I keep cancelling appointments. Talking to a professional feels too official, you know. Like once it's in my records, it's out there forever. But I can't keep it bottled up anymore, so I figured I'd just type it out. This all happened about 8 months ago when I was backpacking through Eastern Europe. I just finished uni and wanted to travel a bit before settling into the whole career thing. I'm not exactly loaded, so I was doing the whole hostel hopping budget travel experience. It was amazing mostly, meeting new people, seeing incredible places, all that. But what happened in Budapest? That's the part I'm still trying to process. I'd been in the city for 3 days staying at this hostel near the Jewish quarter. Nice enough place, but their Wi-Fi was absolute rubbish. I needed to book my next train ticket and check in with my parents, so I headed to this internet cafe about 10 minutes away. The place was a bit of a throwback, honestly, kind of dingy with these partitioned computer stations and outdated PCs, but it was cheap, only about 200 forints per hour, that's like 50 pence, and they had decent coffee. I went in around 7 p.m. after spending the day at the thermal baths. The cafe was pretty quiet, just the owner behind the counter, half asleep, watching something on his phone, and a couple of teenagers playing some online game in the corner. I paid for 2 hours and got assigned to station number 12 near the back wall. When I sat down, I noticed the computer was already on. Not just on, but logged into a browser session. I figured the last person must have just forgotten to log out properly. I was about to close everything and start fresh when I noticed one of the tabs was still loading something. You know when you're a bit nosy about what other people are looking at online? It was like that, just this fleeting curiosity about what the previous user had been browsing. I clicked on the tab, thinking it would be something mundane like Facebook or YouTube. The page that loaded was nothing like that. It took a moment to fully render, but I immediately recognized the browser. It was Tor. I'd never actually used it myself, but I knew what it was for. Accessing the dark web. I'd heard plenty of stories from my friend who studied computer science, all those urban legends about red rooms and black markets. I always thought they were exaggerated, you know. The page itself looked pretty basic. Black background with minimal text. There was a video player in the center that was buffering, and a chat window on the right with messages scrolling by too quickly to read. The video's thumbnail was blurry, but it looked like some kind of room with dim lighting. I should have closed it immediately. That would have been the normal, sensible reaction. But there's this weird thing that happens sometimes. The more you know you shouldn't look at something, the more compelling it becomes. I just sat there, watching the loading circle spin, telling myself I'd close it once I saw what it was, just to satisfy my curiosity. When the video finally loaded, it showed what looked like a basement or cellar. The walls were concrete, and there was a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The room was mostly empty, except for a chair in the middle, and some equipment on a table that I couldn't quite make out. The video quality was poor and grainy, but it was definitely a live stream. There was a timestamp in the corner, and the chat was reacting to something happening. I remember feeling a cold weight in my stomach as I realized what I might be looking at. This wasn't some fake horror stream or art project. There was something genuinely unsettling about how raw and unproduced it looked. I was about to close the tab when someone entered the frame. A person wearing a plain white mask that covered their entire face. They moved with purpose toward the camera, adjusting it slightly. The movement was so normal, so casual, that it made everything more disturbing somehow. The masked figure then turned to face the camera directly, as if looking right at the viewers. Then they raised their hand and seemed to wave. Not a greeting, but more like they were acknowledging specific people watching. I felt like they were waving at me personally, which is ridiculous, I know. But then they did something that made my blood run cold. They held up a piece of paper with writing on it. The paper had today's date and time, along with the words, "Hello Budapest, Station 12. My station, my exact location. I slammed the laptop closed instinctively, then immediately felt stupid because it wasn't my laptop. The cafe owner glanced over, but quickly went back to his phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe the previous user had been chatting with someone and had mentioned their location. Maybe it was some weird coincidence, or I'd misread it in the poor video quality. Taking a deep breath, I reopened the laptop. The browser was still there, but now the video had changed. The camera seemed to be showing a different angle of the same room, but this time focused on the table I'd noticed earlier. On it were various tools, pliers, knives, and other things I didn't want to identify. Next to them was another piece of paper, this one with what looked like a list of usernames or IDs. The chat was going crazy now, messages flying by too fast to read, but certain phrases kept jumping out as they scrolled. Station 12 is watching. We have their IP. Should we send someone? Show them what happens to voyeurs. I tried closing the browser, but it wouldn't respond. I clicked the X repeatedly, then tried Alt F4, then Ctrl Alt Delete. Nothing worked. The screen flickered briefly, and then the video feed changed again. This time, it showed the exterior of a building. With a sickening lurch in my stomach, I recognized it. It was the internet cafe I was sitting in, filmed from across the street. The timestamp showed it was live footage, right now. As I watched, frozen, the camera zoomed in on the windows, panning slowly across until it focused on my station. I could see myself through the window, illuminated by the screen's glow, staring wide-eyed at the monitor. That's when I completely lost it. I jumped up, knocking over my chair, and rushed to the counter. I told the owner there was something wrong with the computer, that I thought it might have been hacked. He just shrugged, clearly not bothered, and said he'd restart it later. I asked him if the previous user had left recently, trying to keep my voice steady. He told me no one had used that station all day. I was the first customer to sit there. I felt physically sick at that point. I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door, glancing across the street to see if anyone was there with a camera. The street was busy with evening traffic and pedestrians, but no one seemed to be filming. As I pushed the door open, my phone buzzed with a notification, a message from an unknown number. "Enjoying Budapest, Station 12. We see you. Don't worry about paying for your time. We've taken care of it. We've taken care of everything." I ran all the way back to my hostel without stopping, constantly looking over my shoulder. When I got to my room, I threw my stuff together and checked out immediately, forfeiting the money I'd paid for the next 2 nights. I caught the first train out the next morning to Vienna, and I didn't use a public computer or Wi-Fi for the rest of my trip. For weeks afterwards, I kept getting text messages from different numbers. They were always brief, just enough to let me know I was still being watched. One came through when I was at dinner in Paris. Red wine stains white shirt. "Be careful." I'd spilled wine on myself just moments before. Another came when I was back home in London. "Your new flat has nice windows, easy to see inside at night." I've moved twice since then. I've gone through every possible explanation for what happened. The most rational one is that someone hacked the computer at the cafe and used its webcam to see me, then used my phone number from the cafe's sign-in system. But that doesn't explain how they're still finding me, or how they know details about my daily life that aren't online. I've changed my phone, my email, even my name on social media. I've installed security systems and keep my curtains closed at all times, but the messages still come through occasionally. The last one arrived yesterday. "Miss Budapest, we miss you. Station 12 is always reserved for you." I don't know what these people want or why they chose me. Maybe I just stumbled onto something I wasn't supposed to see. Maybe it was all just an elaborate scare tactic aimed at random dark web voyeurs. But I can't shake the feeling that by clicking that tab, I somehow put myself on a list that I can't get off of. Like by witnessing whatever twisted thing was happening in that basement, I became part of it somehow. So that's my story. I still haven't gone to the police. What would I even tell them? That I accidentally accessed some creepy dark web stream and now I'm being stalked by anonymous messages. They'd think I was paranoid or making it up. I'm telling you this partly as a warning. Be careful about the digital footprints you leave, even ones you don't realize you're creating. That random computer in an internet cafe might not be as anonymous as you think. And if you ever find yourself looking at a browser session someone else left open, just close it. Some nightmares aren't meant to be shared, and once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. I keep thinking about that list of names I glimpsed on the table in the video. I wonder how many others like me are out there, jumping at shadows and changing their phone numbers every few weeks. I wonder if they also made the mistake of clicking on someone else's session, picking up a nightmare that wasn't theirs to begin with. Okay, so this might just be me, but have you ever had a moment when your phone screen shows you something disturbing and you immediately check over your shoulder to make sure no one can see what you're looking at, even when you're completely alone? 4 months ago, I experienced something on the dark web that I've been unable to shake from my mind. So here goes. It started on an entirely ordinary Tuesday evening. I just finished a late dinner, microwave lasagna, nothing special, and was sitting on the toilet, mindlessly scrolling through my phone as one does. I'd been fascinated with the dark web for about a year by that point. Not because I wanted anything illegal, mind you. I've always been the curious type, ever since I was a kid taking apart my toys to see how they worked. Studied computer science at university. Worked in IT for 8 years now. I suppose that's why I first downloaded Tor. Professional curiosity, I told myself. A bit of a lie, that. I'd browse the dark web occasionally when bored, usually after a few drinks, mostly just looking at marketplaces selling counterfeit goods or dodgy pharmaceuticals. Nothing too sinister, though there was always that thrill of knowing I was somewhere I perhaps shouldn't be, like a digital urban explorer. That night, I'd had a couple of whiskeys after a particularly stressful day at work. My boss had been on my case about some server issues that weren't even my department. The bathroom was the only place my flatmate wouldn't disturb me. So there I sat, trousers around my ankles, scrolling through forums I had no business visiting. I'd found my way onto a form I hadn't seen before. Black background, red text, very 90s web design. The site claimed to be for practical solutions to complex problems. Vague enough to sound legitimate at first glance. I was scrolling through thread titles, mostly stuff about bypassing security systems or creating untraceable identities, when I saw a post titled DIY Silence Methods. My finger hovered over it for a moment. The title was just ambiguous enough that it could have been about soundproofing a room or creating white noise to help with sleep, but something in my gut told me it wasn't. Still, curiosity got the better of me. It always does, doesn't it? I tapped the thread. The page loaded slowly. Tor's never been known for its speed, and what appeared made me physically recoil. The thread contained meticulously detailed guides for creating homemade torture devices. Not historical information or theoretical concepts, but step-by-step instructions with diagrams showing how to build tools specifically designed to cause pain, without leaving visible marks. Tools designed to extract information, while keeping the victim conscious. Tools designed for silence. I remember my bathroom suddenly felt very cold. The radiator had been on full blast. My flatmate always complained about my excessive heating bills, but I felt goosebumps forming on my arms. What disturbed me most wasn't just the content itself, but the clinical, almost academic tone, as if the author was explaining how to assemble IKEA furniture, not instruments of suffering. And worse still, with the comments beneath each design, users suggesting improvements or sharing their field test results. I should have closed the app immediately, should have deleted Tor, reset my phone, and forgotten the whole thing. Instead, like a witness to a car crash, I couldn't look away. I scrolled further, reading through post after post. People were casually discussing the merits of different techniques, like they were reviewing kitchen appliances. This method is too messy for apartment use. This one tends to cause unconsciousness too quickly. I found adding this modification extends the process by several hours. My stomach churned. The microwave lasagna threatened to make a reappearance. Yet I kept scrolling, telling myself I was just documenting the depravity, as if I were some sort of digital anthropologist studying the darkest corners of humanity. What a load of rubbish. I was rubbernecking at human suffering. That's when I noticed the view counter at the bottom of the thread. Only 3 people were currently viewing this horrendous content. The forum administrator, someone with the rank field expert, and me. 3 people in a hidden corner of the internet that should require specific knowledge even to find. I suddenly felt very exposed, like I'd wandered into a private meeting I wasn't invited to. As I was about to close the app, a notification appeared at the top of my screen. A private message. The username matched the field expert, currently viewing the thread. My thumb hovered over the notification. Every instinct told me not to open it. But again, that damn curiosity. I tapped it. First time browsing our resources. I notice you've been on this page for 16 minutes. looking for something specific. I offer practical demonstrations for serious clients. My blood ran cold. 16 minutes. Had I really been staring at this horror show for that long? And what did they mean by practical demonstrations? I didn't respond, immediately closing the app and shutting off my phone entirely. I sat there in the bathroom, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was. Trousers around my ankles, the faint drip of the leaky tap, the only sound breaking the silence. I finally gathered myself, washed my hands thoroughly, as if I could somehow clean away what I'd seen, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept thinking about how the person had known exactly how long I'd been viewing the thread. Was there some tracker embedded in the page? Had I compromised my anonymity somehow? I told myself I was being paranoid. The dark web is supposed to be anonymous. That's the whole point. This was probably just a scammer trying to frighten naive browsers into paying for services that didn't exist. The next morning, I convinced myself it was nothing to worry about. Just another internet weirdo trying to seem more dangerous than they actually were. I went to work, had a relatively normal day, and had almost put the incident out of my mind by the time I got home. Almost. That evening, I received an email to my personal account, not my work email or any address I'd ever used with Tor. The subject line, regarding your interest in silence methods. The body contained only an attachment, a PDF. I scanned it with 3 different antivirus programs before opening it. It wasn't malware, it was worse. The PDF contained a customized silence method, tailored specifically for someone matching my exact physical description. Height, weight, even the small scar on my left wrist from a childhood accident. The document detailed how my apartment layout, which it described with disturbing accuracy, would provide optimal acoustics for the procedure. It mentioned how my neighbor's hearing impairment would be advantageous. It specified which of my kitchen implements would be most effective. I felt the world tilt sideways. How could they possibly know these things about me? I'd been so careful with my identity online. I'd used Tor correctly. I'd never entered personal information. My hands shook as I deleted the email, then emptied my trash folder, as if that would somehow protect me. I spent that night at a friend's house, making up some story about a water leak in my flat. I didn't sleep. Couldn't even close my eyes without seeing those diagrams, now with my face superimposed on the victim. The next day, I contacted my internet provider, changed all my passwords, and factory reset my phone. I convinced myself that someone had hacked my device, that it was all just an elaborate scam to frighten me. I almost believed it too. 3 days later, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. Nothing was missing. Nothing was visibly disturbed. But on my kitchen table sat a small metal object I'd never seen before. It matched exactly one of the components shown in the torture device diagrams, a custom thumb screw with peculiar modifications. Beside it was a handwritten note. For your consideration, field testing appointment scheduled for Friday. I didn't pack. I didn't call the police. What would I even say? That I'd been browsing torture methods on the dark web and now someone wanted to demonstrate them on me. I grabbed my passport, wallet, and the clothes on my bag. I drove straight to my parents' house in Scotland, 6 hours away, checking my rearview mirror the entire journey. I stayed there for 2 weeks, told them I was on holiday. When I finally returned to London, I moved to a new flat in a different area. I changed my phone number, email addresses, even deleted all my social media. I never went back on the dark web, never wanted to. It's been 4 months now, no more strange emails, no more unlocked doors or mysterious objects. I should feel safe. but I don't. Because here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. Whoever found me didn't do it through some dark web tracking. They found me in the real world. They had physical access to my home, which means they weren't just some distant internet bogeyman. They were close. Possibly someone I know. Possibly someone I still interact with every day. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the toilet, scrolling through perfectly innocent websites on my new phone, I'll remember those diagrams. I'll remember how casually people discuss methods of causing unimaginable pain. And I'll wonder if the person who sent me that PDF is watching me right now, silently testing my new security, waiting for the perfect moment to reschedule our field testing appointment. Because that's the thing about the dark web. It's not just some abstract digital realm separate from our everyday lives. The people there are real. They live among us. They could be anyone. The friendly IT guy at your office. The quiet neighbor who always nods hello. And sometimes, when you glimpse their other life, they notice you noticing them. And they don't like it one bit. I used to think of myself as a digital explorer, not a hacker. I never had the skills for that, but someone who enjoyed poking around the dustier corners of the internet, finding weird forums, abandoned websites, obscure file-sharing networks. It was a hobby, something to do during those long, sleepless nights when my anxiety wouldn't let me rest. I never thought it would lead me to what I found last winter, or that I'd still be looking over my shoulder nearly a year later. I've tried talking to a therapist about this, but I always stop short of sharing the full story. How do you tell someone you've glimpsed something so fundamentally wrong that it's changed how you see the world? So I'm writing it down instead, maybe as a warning, maybe just to finally get it out of my head. I work in IT, network administration for a mid-sized company in Sheffield. Nothing exciting, just making sure systems stay up and running, troubleshooting when Karen from accounting can't connect to the printer for the 10th time that week. I'd been with the company for about 3 years when this happened, comfortable enough in my role that my mind often wandered during the quieter moments. I'd always been interested in computers. Built my first desktop at 15 from parts I'd saved up for over 6 months. Taught myself basic coding from library books because my parents couldn't afford internet at home yet. That early fascination with technology never really left me, even as it became my career. My flat has a small second bedroom that I'd converted into a home office. Really just a desk crammed against the window with my old desktop computer and a couple of monitors. Not the sleekest setup, but it was mine, and it was where I spent most of my evenings. The desk was littered with the usual debris of someone who spends too much time at a computer. Empty coffee mugs with rings of dried caffeine at the bottom. Scraps of paper with scribbled IP addresses and notes. A stress ball shaped like a server that a colleague had given me as a joke gift. The walls were a dingy off-white that I'd been meaning to repaint since moving in 3 years earlier. It was a Tuesday evening in November. I remember because I'd been putting off doing my online grocery shop, which I usually did on Mondays, and the reminder had popped up on my phone twice already. Outside, the wind was howling. One of those proper northern gales that make the windows rattle in their frames. My heating had been playing up again, so I was sitting at my desk wearing 2 jumpers and a pair of thick socks, occasionally rubbing my hands together between typing. I'd been exploring the dark web on and off for a couple of years by then. Nothing serious, mostly just curiosity about whether it lived up to its reputation. I'd set up all the proper security measures. Tor browser, VPN, the works. Most of what I'd found was disappointingly mundane. Drug marketplaces that looked like badly designed eBay pages from 2005. Forums discussing privacy and cryptocurrency. The occasional repository of pirated software. Nothing like the horror stories you hear, which I'd mostly written off as urban legends exaggerated by people who'd never actually been there. That night, I was following a trail of links from a forum discussing privacy tools. One link led to another, then another. You know how it goes when you're mindlessly browsing. My coffee had gone cold, forgotten on the desk, as I clicked through increasingly obscure websites. The lamp on my desk was the only light in the room, casting long shadows across the walls. My eyes were starting to sting from staring at the screen too long. But I was in that zone where you keep going despite knowing you should probably call it a night. I ended up on what appeared to be a classified site, similar layout to Gumtree or Craigslist, but with a minimalist design that was typical of dark web pages. The categories seemed standard at first: electronics, vehicles, services, property. But there was one category that stood out: merchandise. Something about the clinical term made me pause, my cursor hovering over the link. I remember taking a sip of my cold coffee and grimacing at the taste. It had that bitter, almost metallic flavor that coffee gets when it's been sitting out too long. I clicked on merchandise, expecting to find counterfeit goods or drugs arranged by category. The page loaded slowly, another typical dark web experience, and when it finally appeared, it took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. The listings were organized by location, with major cities and regions from around the world as headers. Underneath each location were dozens of entries with brief descriptions and prices listed in Bitcoin. I scrolled down to the UK section, more out of curiosity about my own country than anything else. There were subsections for London, Manchester, Birmingham, and, to my surprise, Sheffield, my city. My stomach tightened as I clicked on it, though I couldn't have explained why I felt uneasy. The Sheffield section contained about 20 listings, each with a similar format: a reference number, an age, a brief physical description, and a price. No names, no photos, just entries like SHF 2241 19 brunette athletic build, followed by a Bitcoin amount. It took me embarrassingly long to realize what I was looking at. I'd like to blame it on being tired or the bizarre clinical nature of the listings, but I think part of me was deliberately refusing to connect the dots. When understanding finally hit, it was like a physical blow. These weren't items, they were people, human beings categorized like products, listed for sale in my city. I remember pushing back from my desk so violently that my chair hit the wall behind me. My hands were shaking, and I felt suddenly cold in a way that had nothing to do with my faulty heating. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of sick roleplay site, or an elaborate scam targeting gullible people with dark fantasies. Because the alternative, that there was an actual human trafficking operation running in Sheffield, cataloging people like merchandise, was too horrific to contemplate. I should have closed the browser immediately. I should have reported what I'd found, though to whom and with what evidence, I wasn't sure. Instead, I found myself scrolling through the listings again, this time with a growing sense of dread. Some of the entries included additional notes: suitable for domestic use, experienced in service industry, no visible markings. The clinical language made it all the more disturbing, like browsing a catalogue of appliances, not human lives. At the bottom of the page was a section labeled Local Available Inventory. What caught my eye, what made my blood run cold, was the postcode listed at the top of this section. S10, my postcode, the area where I lived. The listings under this heading were more detailed, including approximate locations: 500 meters from Encliffe Park, Broomhill area, near primary school, Crooks, terrace property with red door. I knew these places. I walked past them nearly every day. The primary school was 2 streets over from my flat. Encliffe Park was where I went running on weekends. These weren't abstract locations in a distant city. This was my neighborhood, the streets I traveled daily. And according to this site, there were people being held there, listed for sale like furniture. I sat there for a long time. The only sound in the room, my own shallow breathing and the hum of my computer. The wind outside had died down, leaving an eerie silence. My mind was racing, trying to process what I was seeing while simultaneously looking for any indication that it wasn't real. Maybe it was all an elaborate hoax. Maybe I'd stumbled upon some kind of alternate reality game with a disturbing premise. Maybe. But deep down, I knew. The specificity of the locations, the matter-of-fact descriptions, the total lack of dramatic flair that you'd expect from fiction, it all pointed to something genuine. And then I noticed something that removed any remaining doubt. At the very bottom of the page was a recently sold section with about a dozen entries marked as transaction completed. One of them included a reference to a news story I'd seen just the week before. A university student who had disappeared while walking home from a club. The entry simply read, SHF 1103, 21, blonde, petite, sold, domestic, UAE. I felt physically sick. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely use the mouse. I needed to report this to the police, to someone who could actually do something. But as I reached for my phone, a notification appeared in the corner of my browser. A message from the site administrator. Unusual browsing pattern detected. Local viewer identified. Sheffield, S10 area, Western Bank. Verification in progress. My address. They had my actual address. I slammed my laptop shut and yanked the power cord from the wall, as if physically disconnecting could somehow undo what had just happened. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of how they could have identified me despite all my precautions. Had my VPN failed? Had I made some basic security mistake? It didn't matter how. What mattered was that whoever ran this site now knew exactly where I was. I spent that night at a hotel on the other side of the city, too terrified to stay in my own flat. I paid in cash, used a fake name at check-in, and spent hours staring at the ceiling, jumping at every sound in the corridor outside. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went to the police station. I told them I'd found what I believed to be a human trafficking operation online, but I was vague about how I'd come across it. I didn't mention the dark web or the message I'd received. Even in my panicked state, I was aware of how it might sound, how easily I could become a suspect rather than a reporter. The officer took my statement with what seemed like appropriate concern, but I could tell by his expression that he wasn't entirely convinced. Without specific details about victims or perpetrators, without any concrete evidence beyond my word, there wasn't much they could do. He promised they would look into it and took my contact information. But as I left the station, I had the sinking feeling that nothing would come of it. I stayed with a friend for the next week, making excuses about my heating being broken. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the real reason. It sounded too far-fetched, too dramatic. When I finally returned to my flat, I spent the first night sleeping with a kitchen knife beside my bed, starting awake at every creak and groan of the old building. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing happened. No suspicious characters appeared at my door. No strange cars parked outside my building. I began to think that perhaps the verification message had been an automated response, a scare tactic to frighten away anyone who stumbled across the site. Or maybe they had so many more important concerns that one random IT worker wasn't worth their time. I began to relax, gradually returning to my normal routines, though I never again ventured onto the dark web. Then, about a month later, I noticed something. There was a new listing on the regular missing persons board at the supermarket. A young woman, early 20s, last seen leaving her flat in Broomhill. Her flat was on my street, 3 buildings down from mine. The poster had been put up by her parents, who had travelled from London after not hearing from her for several days. 2 days after that, another missing person, this time a young man, a student at the university, last seen at a pub less than half a mile from my flat. By the third disappearance a week later, another woman, this one from the building directly opposite mine. I knew it wasn't coincidence. They were sending me a message. They were showing me that they could take people right from my doorstep, and no one could stop them. And they were letting me know that they hadn't forgotten about me. I moved the following week, breaking my lease and forfeiting my deposit. I found a flat in Manchester, changed my job, my phone number, even deleted all my social media accounts. For months, I looked over my shoulder constantly, convinced I was being followed. I saw significance in every coincidence, threat in every stranger's glance. It's been almost a year now. Some days I can almost convince myself that I overreacted, that the disappearances in my old neighborhood were just a terrible coincidence. But then I'll see a news report about human trafficking, or a missing person case with familiar details, and that cold dread returns. I've learned more than I ever wanted to about how these networks operate, how vast and well-connected they are, how they can reach into everyday life while remaining invisible to most people. Last week, I received a letter at my new address, an address that isn't listed anywhere, that I've shared only with my parents and my new employer. There was no return address, no message inside, just a printout of a classified listing, MCR-338229, IT professional, current location Northern Quarter, status pending acquisition. They found me, and now they're letting me know that I've moved from being a witness to being merchandise. I'm writing this from a hotel room near Piccadilly Station. I've bought a ticket to Glasgow for tomorrow, leaving at 5:43 a.m. From there, I don't know where I'll go. I don't know if there's anywhere I can go where they won't eventually find me. If you're reading this, stay away from the dark corners of the internet. Some things, once seen, can't be unseen. Some knowledge comes with a price you never stop paying. And if you ever see a classified listing that doesn't quite make sense, that uses clinical language to describe what sounds like people rather than products, close your browser immediately. Don't scroll. Don't investigate. Just walk away. I think there's someone in the hallway outside my room. They've been standing there for several minutes now. The door handle just moves slightly, as if someone's testing whether it's locked. I don't think I'm going to make that train tomorrow. I've been trying to make sense of what happened for weeks now, sorting through the details, trying to figure out which parts were real and which were something else. I still wake up in cold sweats, checking my wrists for marks that have long since faded. It started because I was broke, properly, desperately broke. My flatmate had moved out without warning, leaving me with double rent in East London that I couldn't possibly afford on my uni stipend. I'd been picking up odd jobs online, transcription work, user testing, those survey sites that pay pennies. Anything to avoid calling my parents and admitting I couldn't hack it on my own. That's when I found this posting on one of those gig economy sites I'd been trawling. The description was vague but intriguing. Something about participating in an immersive live performance project with minimal acting experience required. The pay was ridiculous, £500 for what they described as a single 8-hour session. When I applied, not expecting much, I received an almost immediate response asking if I was comfortable with being filmed and with simulated scenarios of intensity. I remember laughing to myself about how sketchy it sounded, but also thinking it was probably just some art student's experimental film or a marketing stunt for a horror movie, the kind of thing that would make a good story later. They asked for a photo of myself and some basic measurements. Looking back, I realized they were assessing whether I'd fit whatever look they needed, whether I'd be believable on camera. After agreeing to their terms, I received coordinates to a storage facility on the outskirts of London, along with a specific unit number and a time, 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. The late hour should have been another warning sign, but they explained it as necessary for the aesthetic they were trying to achieve. I figured it was just filmmaker types being precious about their vision, the kind who think everything looks better at night. I remember the journey there vividly, taking the tube to its furthest stop, then a bus that came only once an hour, then walking the final mile down unlit roads with only my phone torch to guide me. The storage facility was one of those modern ones, all gleaming metal and keypad entries, but eerily deserted at that hour. The only sounds were the distant hum of the North Circular and the occasional security light clicking on as I passed. Using the code they'd sent, I let myself through the main gate. The facility was massive, rows and rows of identical units stretching in every direction. I followed the numbered signs until I found the one I'd been directed to. It looked exactly like all the others, a roll-up metal door with a keypad lock. I punched in the code I'd been given, half expecting it not to work, half hoping it wouldn't. A note on the table instructed me to sit and wait, explaining that the scenario would begin shortly and that I should react naturally to whatever happened. It emphasized that everything was staged and that I could end the simulation at any time by saying a specific phrase, something like Emerald System Shutdown or similar industry jargon. I remember thinking it was all very dramatic, but also kind of exciting in a strange way, like I was in on some secret project. I sat in the chair, noticing for the first time that there were small cameras mounted in the corners of the unit. The laptop on the table was open but locked. I waited for about 20 minutes, checking my phone occasionally, wondering if I'd been stood up or if this was all some elaborate prank. Just as I was considering leaving, the laptop screen suddenly came to life. It displayed what looked like a streaming interface, very bare bones, with a simple chat window on the side and a counter showing the number of viewers. The number was climbing rapidly: 23, 47, 89, 156. I realized with growing unease that whatever was about to happen was being broadcast somewhere. The chat was filling with messages in various languages, many containing Bitcoin amounts and what looked like bids. This definitely wasn't some student film project. Before I could process what I was seeing, the storage unit door rattled violently. 2 figures in dark clothes and balaclavas rushed in. It happened so fast, One moment I was alone. The next I was being forced to the ground, my hands zip-tied behind my back. I tried to remember the safe word, but panic had erased it from my mind. I kept telling myself this was the performance, that this was what I'd signed up for. The roughness felt realistic, but surely that was just good acting. One of them set up something on a tripod, another camera, more professional than the small ones in the corners. The other dragged the mattress to the center of the room, positioning it directly in front of the laptop so that whoever was watching would have a clear view. They moved me onto the mattress, and that's when the first seed of real doubt crept in. The zip ties were cutting into my wrists, drawing blood. That seemed extreme for a simulation. When I tried to speak, to ask if this was part of the scenario, one of them pressed duct tape roughly over my mouth. I could see the laptop screen from where I lay. The viewer count now in the hundreds. The chat scrolling too fast to read. There was a moment of clarity when I realized that whatever line had existed between performance and reality had blurred beyond recognition. These people weren't actors. Or if they had started as actors, the scenario had evolved into something else. The panic must have shown in my eyes because one of them leaned in close and whispered that this was all part of the experience, that I was doing great, that the audience was loving my authentic fear. I tried to convince myself they were right, that this was all elaborately staged, that the blood I could feel trickling from my wrists was somehow fake. But then one of them pulled out a knife, a hunting knife with a serrated edge, not a prop, and began cutting away my clothes. The cold metal against my skin felt undeniably real. The goosebumps that rose weren't performance. The laptop chimed repeatedly as the bits in the chat increased. I could see usernames and amounts flashing by as people paid to watch, to suggest what should happen next. The performing arts project facade had completely fallen away, replaced by the sickening realization that I was the unwitting star of some dark web live stream. A stream where the audience didn't just watch, but directed the action through their payments. One of the figures checked the laptop periodically, nodding to the other as if receiving instructions. They set up additional lights, positioned to eliminate any shadows that might hide what was happening from the viewers. There was a methodical professionalism to their movements that terrified me more than if they'd been frenzied or emotional. This was routine for them. I wasn't their first. The hours that followed exist in my memory as fragments, moments of excruciating clarity punctuated by merciful periods of dissociation, where I seemed to float above my own body, watching what was happening to someone else. I remember the cold concrete floor against my back, the laptop chimes marking increased bids, the clinical way they responded to the highest paying viewers' requests, the way they occasionally tilted the camera to better capture my reactions. What haunts me most is the uncertainty that lingers even now. At some point during that endless night, they removed the duct tape and started asking me questions, increasingly personal ones, about my fears, my limits, my pain threshold. When I begged them to stop, they insisted this was all part of the performance, that I was doing brilliantly, that the audience could tell the difference between real fear and acting. They kept reassuring me that everything was under control, that I was completely safe. And sometimes, in their gentler moments, I almost believed them. When they gave me water, when they checked that the zip ties weren't cutting off circulation, when they explained what would happen next, as if walking an actor through a scene. Those moments of apparent concern made everything more confusing. Were parts of this real and others staged? Was I actually in danger? Or was this an extreme form of immersive theatre that I'd simply misunderstood? Near what I think was morning, though with no windows it was impossible to tell. The stream seemed to reach some sort of conclusion. The viewer count had dropped significantly. One of them checked the laptop one last time before closing it. They removed the zip ties, handed me a bundle of clothes that weren't mine, and told me I'd done well. They counted out cash, the full £500 plus what they called a performance bonus, and placed it on the table. Then they simply left. No explanations, no debrief, nothing to definitively tell me whether what I'd experienced was real violence or elaborate theatre. Just instructions not to leave for 20 minutes, and a reminder that I'd signed an NDA prohibiting me from discussing the project with anyone. I sat there in the empty storage unit, pulling on the oversized clothes with shaking hands, trying to make sense of what had happened. The cameras were still there in the corners. I wondered if they were still recording. If someone was watching me try to reassemble myself. I took the money. I still don't know why. Maybe as evidence that it happened at all. The journey home is a blur. I remember sunlight hurting my eyes as I emerged from the storage facility. I remember people on the tube staring at my disheveled appearance, the clothes that didn't fit, the visible marks on my wrist and neck. I remember the overwhelming urge to tell someone, anyone, what had happened, but being unable to find the words. How do you explain something when you yourself don't understand what was real? In the days that followed, I searched for the website I'd seen on the laptop screen. I trawled the dark web using tutorials I found online, looking for any trace of the stream, for my own face among the videos for sale. I found nothing conclusive, just similar streams that made me physically ill to glimpse, never knowing if I was among them. I reported nothing to the police. What would I say? That I voluntarily went to a storage unit in the middle of the night for money? That I wasn't sure if I'd been assaulted or had participated in extreme performance art? That I took the payment and left without seeking help? They'd either dismiss me or worse, investigate and find the NDA I'd signed, the messages where I'd agreed to participate in simulated scenarios of intensity. The storage unit company had no record of the unit number I provided when I called anonymously to ask about it. According to their system, that particular unit had been empty for months. The gig posting had disappeared from the website where I'd found it. The email address I'd communicated with bounced back all my messages. Sometimes I almost convinced myself it was all an elaborate production, some extreme form of immersive theatre or a psychological experiment. The fact that they paid me, that they didn't keep me there or do lasting physical damage, suggests boundaries existed. But then I look at the scars on my wrists, the nightmares that wake me screaming, and I know something genuinely traumatic happened in that storage unit. The worst part is the uncertainty, the not knowing which parts were performance and which were real, whether the audience was watching fiction or genuine torture, whether I was a victim or a performer who simply hadn't understood the role. I check my bank account obsessively now, looking for unexpected deposits that might indicate my continued unwitting participation in something I don't understand. I've covered every camera on every device I own. I've moved flats, changed my phone number, deleted all my social media. But I still feel watched. Still wonder if somewhere, on some corner of the dark web, people are bidding for a sequel. After all, they know where to find me. They know what I look like, and they know I need the money. Every time I pass a storage facility now, I wonder how many units contain people like me. People caught in that terrible space between performance and reality, never knowing if their fear is entertainment or evidence.
I'm not looking for sympathy. I need to say that straight away, because there's none left for me. Not from anyone who knows what happened, and not from myself either. If anything, I deserve worse. This happened 4 years ago. At the time, I was working whatever jobs I could get, mostly cash-in-hand stuff, warehouse shifts, moving stock, the kind of work where no one asks questions if you show up on time. I got a text from a bloke I'd worked with once before, asking if I wanted a night job. 1 shift, paid double what I usually made in a week. All I had to do was turn up and follow instructions. I remember thinking it was dodgy, but I didn't care. I was behind on rent, my car was knackered, and I told myself it'd be some sketchy off-the-books work. Unloading a van, maybe something with stolen gear. Nothing personal. The address was miles out, an old industrial estate past the edge of town. I remember driving through fog, so thick my headlights barely touched it. The unit itself was massive, a proper old slaughterhouse, the kind they used for cattle. It hadn't been operational for years, but the power was still on. Sodium lights buzzing overhead, flickering in places, giving everything that weird orange glow like a cigarette filter. There was no one at the gate, no sign telling me where to go, so I let myself in through a side door that was already propped open. That should have been the first red flag. I remember noticing how clean it smelled. Not fresh, but not rotting either. Just cold metal and disinfectant, like someone had gone through it with a pressure washer not long before. The main floor was empty, just metal grates, rusted chains hanging from the ceiling, and drains running down the middle, stained so dark I didn't want to think about what had been washed down them over the years. There were cameras too, not old security ones, but sleek, black ones, mounted high in every corner, newer than anything else in the building. I was halfway across the floor when a door slammed behind me. It wasn't subtle. Someone wanted me to know I wasn't alone. I called out, just instinct, but no one answered. That's when I saw the monitor, mounted against the far wall, facing the center of the room. The screen was split into sections, live feeds from all the cameras, showing me from every angle. The only thing worse than seeing yourself like that is knowing someone else is seeing it too. There was a table in the middle of the floor, stainless steel, bolted to the ground, fitted with straps at each corner. You've probably seen something like it in medical dramas, but there was nothing sterile about this. The straps were too wide, meant for arms and legs much bigger than mine. There were stains down the legs, not old either. Some of them were still wet. A metal tray sat next to it, covered with tools that didn't belong in a kitchen or a hospital. Pliers with the grips worn down, a hooked blade, the handle wrapped in what looked like cloth, but felt like skin when I touched it. A cordless drill with the bit already caked in something dark and flaking. I told myself it was some weird art project. I actually stood there, in the middle of all that, convincing myself it was a prank or some viral thing they wanted me to be part of. That's how badly you want to believe you're still safe. You'll invent any excuse, no matter how stupid. Then the screen changed. The live feeds shrank, pushed into the corners, replaced by text, a countdown timer starting at 300 seconds. Below it, a message, performance required. Session begins. I wasn't scared yet, not fully. I kept telling myself it was some stupid initiation, that maybe I was being tested for the job, see how I'd handle pressure. But my hands were sweating, and my mouth was so dry I could hear my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth every time I swallowed. The door across the room opened, and they brought him in. I never found out his name. They'd already wrapped his head in duct tape, a hole cut around his mouth so he could breathe, shallow, panicked breaths that sounded wet, like he'd been screaming long enough to lose his voice. His arms and legs were bare, skin red from too tight restraints. He wasn't struggling anymore, just shaking, head twitching side to side like he was trying to convince himself this wasn't happening either. They didn't speak, didn't show their faces, just hands, gloved, fast, efficient, strapping him down to the table before walking back out, leaving me standing there, alone with him. The screen changed again. You will perform, or you will replace him. The camera feeds filled with text, chat messages in every language imaginable. Some were joking, some were arguing, but most of them were bidding. Each new message raised the price next to my name. I was the entertainment, not just him, me. They weren't paying to watch me fight or try to escape. They were paying to see how much of myself I'd give up to stay alive. There were tools. That was the whole point. Every time I hesitated, the bids dropped. Every time I picked something up, they surged back up, like I was livestock being weighed before the slaughter. The first thing I did was cut his shirt off. It wasn't even violent. I told myself it was to check for injuries, to see if there was already some plan I was meant to follow. His chest was covered in cuts, some shallow, some deep enough that I could see tissue beneath the skin. Old wounds, reopened for the cameras. I stood there for 2 minutes, staring at the tray, willing myself to wake up, to snap out of it, to find the camera that would show me this was fake. Then the countdown started again. Performance failure equals replacement. I used the pliers first. They were cold, slippery in my hands. I couldn't grip right, couldn't get the angle, but I pulled until the nail gave way with a thick, wet pop. His scream didn't sound human, neither did mine. I don't remember how long it lasted. Minutes, hours. It didn't matter. Every new act had a price attached. The worse it got, the more they paid. Each time I stopped, the screen flashed red, warning me what would happen if I didn't keep going. When it was over, they took him away. He wasn't dead. That would have been mercy. They left me there, covered in blood, shaking so badly I couldn't stand. The screen flickered one last time. Performance accepted. You may leave. The door opened, just like that. I walked out. No one stopped me. No one said a word. I still see his face. Every time I close my eyes, I hear that sound. The way flesh separates when you twist instead of cut. Sometimes I wonder if he's still alive, being passed to the next performer. Someone just like me, just desperate enough to take the job. I haven't told anyone. Who would believe me? But sometimes I get emails, no subject, no message, just a single attachment. My performance review. ...